Okay, well, hey everybody, this is John, and I am back with Angela for what is now a monthly live stream. And I was wondering if this is going to keep people away, but I do see there are people filling into the room right now. However, I did get a message from StreamYard that says that we're having trouble streaming to Facebook, so that might be an issue. If you're on Facebook, or if you know any people that are trying to listen on Facebook, tell them to come on over to YouTube, and they might be able to participate a little bit better. So before we go any further, let's say hi, Joe. Good to see you, and whoever else is out there. Angela from our Boise location. How are you doing over there, Angela?
I'm doing well, thank you.
It's nice to be speaking with you again. I think I've enjoyed the break. It's been fun doing a weekly live stream for the last couple of years, but it's one of those things that we just can't do forever. So it's nice to be on a monthly schedule at least.
Exactly. And
Uh,
hey, Joe, can you let us know how our sound is? I
oh
heard a little
yeah,
fluctuation when I undid or when I unmuted, and so I wasn't sure if our sound's still okay.
I was going to say too, I cranked my microphone up as high as I possibly could because Angela's sound is always much clearer and better than mine. And I've got this expensive microphone, and I think you're using the microphone on your Chromebook. I don't know.
I'm using some Samsung earbuds, with
Mhm.
the cord.
And
Uh,
nobody complains about your sound, but I'm constantly
yeah,
hearing, we can't hear you,
I'm
John.
quite loud, so
Yeah, it says that you're quite loud. And let me make sure that I'm,
yes.
I'm using the correct microphone, by the way. Yeah, I am. Okay. So, so anyway, so Angela came up with a topic. Hey, Jennifer, good to see you out there with Joe. Okay, so Angela came up with a topic that I thought was really good, and she wrote out some questions about it. And it's all about perspective and gaining perspective. If it's a life skill for recovery. And so she wrote out all these questions, and I spent maybe 3 hours or so today writing a response to those questions, thinking that it would give me something to talk about tonight on the live stream. But then when I finished writing all that stuff, I looked at it and I thought, oh, I don't know, man, I don't think this pertains to the subject at all. So we'll see how it goes. Angela, since you're the one who thought about this topic, can you just kind of share your thoughts about perspective and why you thought that this might be something that we should be talking about? Hey, Karen.
Sure. Yeah. I was just, trying to think of a topic, that had something to do with where I'm at and the kinds of things that I think about in recovery. And gaining perspective was, something that I think is key to not only my recovery, but to, life itself now. It's an essential life skill, particularly in, these kind of crazy times that we've been experiencing the last, few years. And so I was thinking about, what is, perspective? What does it mean to gain perspective, and what was, how did I learn to, get perspective as a kid, if I did? Where does it come in helpful? And what was I like, when I was actively in my addiction, and drinking? What was it like then, as far as perspective? And because I can remember feeling like I didn't really have a lot of options or choices. Everything seemed like a bigger deal than it was, and I often felt, persecuted, and like
Yeah.
poor me, as they say, pour me another drink, and that. What drew me into recovery, one was, yeah, feeling sorry for myself was part of it. But the looking and seeing that some people were in a similar situation as me, or had been in a similar spot, and they were able to change their life. And so, maybe I could do that as well. And so it was shifting my perspective of what my options in life were.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so thinking on, when I was young, what would have been things that would have taught perspective. And one, I grew up with Mr. Rogers, and so he did a good job with talking about feelings
Hmm,
and other people and stuff. So I learned a little bit from that, and from reading. I've read some other things that suggest that reading is, amazing for empathy, for
mhm,
growing empathy, and for us putting ourselves in other situations so that we can get perspective of what it might be like to be in whatever situation is in the book. And also, if you think of just when we're kids and we're playing and stuff, that we generally just like go all in on something. So if you're pretending to be a witch, you get a broom, and
mhm.
you sit on it like you're riding it, and you go around, and you're not like sitting, thinking about, oh, I need to be in perspective of a witch. You just are a witch. And so then
Right.
you act like a witch, or a kitty cat, or whatever it is that you're doing. And so play is another thing that I think that we use to start learning about perspective. But then those of us who've had some difficulties, or dysfunctional families, things like that, we start to develop a skewed idea of how
Yeah.
things are, a
Yeah.
skewed idea of what it means to show love, or of what our responsibility as a family member might be or not be. Some of us, learn that we're responsible for everyone else's feelings, and or we have to take care of other people, or that we don't have to take care of anybody, and that it's only us, and we can only count on ourselves. Things like
Mhm.
that. So those are all things that I think go into perspective
Yeah.
growing up, and then some of us have difficulty coping. And so we turn to different substances or behaviors to get relief from that. And then that continues to narrow down our ability to have perspective on things.
Right.
And so getting
Well,
into recovery, I think, is where we start to build perspective again.
yeah. I might not have been that far off then when I was thinking about this, because
Hmm.
I was thinking about, when I was growing up and how I viewed the world and how I may have learned to view the world in that way. And the first thing I thought of was growing up in a household where my mother was mentally ill and
Hmm.
prone to outbursts and would do whatever she could to stay away from the kids, So,
Right.
I was thinking about that and how that skewed my perspective. And the one thing that dawned on me was stigma.
Hmm.
It was that we all knew there was something wrong with my mom, but we
Hmm.
wouldn't talk about it.
Yes.
And it was a secret. And I learned from that, I think, that I should also not talk about if I'm afraid or any feelings that I have that might be bothering me,
Hmm.
because that would just show that there's something wrong with me.
Right.
So my perspective of the world was that I couldn't trust people
Hmm.
with who I couldn't trust people and allow myself to be vulnerable with people. And
Right.
that set me up, I think, later in life to not seek help when I needed it. But
Right.
Angela, when I stopped and thought about it, I think that what I thought about was I'm not unique. I think this is how everybody is. And then I ran across an article in the Wall Street Journal about the stigma of mental illness. And what it was talking about how all these companies are trying to get their employees to take care of their wellness, and
Mhm.
they're increasing their mental health benefits, but
Mhm.
employees aren't taking advantage of these mental health benefits. And one of the main reasons for that was they didn't want their employer to think that they were getting care for their mental health,
Right.
because of the stigma. So anyway, I wrote
Yeah.
about that, and then I read the article, and I thought, well, I don't know, man. I think the stigma of is just the way it is for everybody.
Yeah. I think that that too, from what you described, it probably sounds like, just in family systems and roles that, your mom was the one who got to express like that.
Right.
And so I think that sometimes we gain, these false ideas that we can't, that only
Right.
one person in the
Right.
family,
Right.
gets to act out and show, any sort of emotions as well, and that wasn't your role.
Right.
And so I think that can be a part of it as well,
Right.
because most of the time we don't know about the stigma, when we're younger. We don't know what exactly is normal and not. And then, as we gain experience with other families and see how they act, then we're like, oh, wait a minute, yeah, maybe
Hmm.
this isn't normal, you know,
Yeah.
and then what that means, and we internalize, what
Yeah.
is our role, whether we're allowed to act out, and also determining what would be an appropriate, if you what you've been given as the way to express yourself is either to act out in some demonstrative way, or not share anything about your feelings,
Right.
and pretend that you don't have them.
Right.
That doesn't leave you a whole lot to work with in there. Is that you're either going to be somebody who acts out, and or you're going to do the complete opposite. And so part of perspective for me is learning that it's not an all or nothing game.
Hmm.
In for pretty much anything,
Right.
that there are very few things in the world or in life that are um, just all or nothing, or
Hmm.
black and white like that. The majority of the stuff that we deal with or think about, or situations or people, all of it is shades of gray and middle
Hmm.
ground type of stuff, good and bad, even things like murder. Well, sometimes it's the right thing to do in the
Oh, we have a
particular
caller.
situation. So yeah, so
Let's
that's
take
what
this
I like
call.
about perspective.
Here we go. Hello. How you doing? Waverly, Virginia.
Hello, this John. How are you doing, John?
Oh,
This Fred in
Fred.
Virginia.
Good to hear from you.
How's it? Haven't talked to you for a while.
It has been a while.
I I'm enjoying the conversation on your perspectives. Outlook, viewpoint, perspective. Uh, in art, it's the golden ratio.
Right.
Many things. Where you focus, what you focus on, is a way of looking at perspective. And if you keep thinking about the past all the time,
Yeah.
that it dredges up a bunch of stuff that doesn't really fit well for you
True.
anymore,
True.
because this this reality that we have in the now is not the same reality we had when the problems occurred or the
Right.
situation evolved.
I think the past could be useful just to learn from it, and to see and to chart our journey, so I can see
Yeah,
where I started and how I got to where I am now. But I wouldn't want to
that's
dwell
correct.
on it. Yeah.
That's correct. You don't want to dwell on that stuff that gives you pain. If
Right.
you feel bad about those things that happened when you were young, you just have to let it go.
Sure.
Let it go with love. Let go with love.
Right.
And detach yourself. You detach yourself from those feelings.
Right.
If you ever did an amends step, even if your mom has passed,
Right.
you can always write a letter to her
Yep.
and just bring it to her rest place of rest, and
Yep.
drop it off.
Did it? Done
And let it
it?
let it go.
Yeah. So we'll be talking
Let it,
later on in the stream about how we moved on beyond this. So we just wanted to talk about, I guess, how our early experiences in life kind of affected our perspective, and how that may have changed over time. So thank you for calling,
It
Fred. It was
changes
really nice
every
to
day.
hear from you. Hmm?
It changes every day, John.
It does indeed.
It changes every day.
It does
That's
indeed.
the same
I
way
don't
for
even
one
know
of
if I have the
us.
right perspective now, to be honest with you. But anyway, Fred, thank you for calling. We have the lines open
Same
for
way
anyone
for us.
else who might want to call. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
Take
Thanks,
care.
John.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.
Thanks, Fred. Bye-bye.
You too. Hi,
So,
Angela.
bye bye, Fred. So, Angela, your question was, did you have a skewed perspective while active in addiction?
Mhm.
And I guess that we both answer yes to that.
Yeah, I would say that very few people would, consider using substances in a way that's detrimental to your life as having a right on perspective, an accurate perspective, because yeah, you're hurting yourself as well as other
Yeah,
people.
just the
So
nature of the deal. I mean, being
yeah,
in denial, not being able to recognize that the addiction is causing you problems in life, or not
right,
being able to
yeah,
stop it, and having
yeah.
to live in this weird, diluted reality that somehow I can get it all together if I just try hard enough.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or tomorrow it'll be better, or just one won't, be a problem, or, all of that kind of stuff.
Right,
And yeah, and or, just thinking that whatever the substance or behavior is, can be a part of your life, if you just do it right, and and it never happens. So,
right,
and also some of the reasons that we tell ourselves of why we're continuing with it, whatever behavior or addiction it
right.
is, well, if you had my life you would too, or that so and so did this, and so you don't have as many options in life, or yeah, just a skewed view, or a smaller
Sure.
vision. You don't have that ability to gain perspective. Everything feels like you're
Right,
falling into a hole all the time, very much like depression, where
right,
it just feels like you're in a hole, and it's very difficult to crawl out of.
right. So
So
your
yeah,
next
so
question, though, it talks
mhm,
about, did your perspective change or improve after getting into recovery?
mhm.
And why don't you answer that question?
Yes, well, it's really more of the experience of getting into
Yeah,
recovery,
yeah,
that I was talking about. So what
right,
is that? And so I think, like I said, that starting off, there's an awareness that people sitting in the room with you, when we sat in actual rooms, which I guess some people do now, but that these people had been in a similar spot and had found
right,
a new way of being in the world. And
right,
so that was like the first kind of glimpse of perspective, of opening up to the idea, that maybe this could work for me as well. And then the other good step of being in meetings is hearing stories where people would share about what their experience was. And sometimes it had to do with their drinking, and sometimes it was just their life experience, now with some of the day-to-day stuff, like trying to be a good employee and stuff like that. And hearing how they handled different situations, and or how they had gone through a similar situation and they had changed their perspective on it. And so it wasn't a big deal for them anymore, or it didn't bother them, or they had figured out a new way to handle whatever the situation was. And so hearing that, that there's different possibilities, was something that I liked, and something that, about perspective, that was really important to me.
yeah,
Um, and that not everything, that everyone said was going to be something that worked for me, was another way that
mm,
you expand your perspective, is that
right,
this situation worked for this person, it could work for me, I could try it out, or I can know that, yeah, that's probably not the best thing for me, but I'm glad it worked for them. Same way with take what you want and leave the rest,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
which is something that I think just really needs to either be said more often, or because it's still such a problem, and such a problem in our Facebook group, and
Right.
in other areas where there's very little ability to listen to other people who have ideas or views that are different from your own, and
Yeah.
just let them have those views without having it be something that has a reflection on you, or on myself,
Yeah.
or whatever. And so
And that's
going
something
through
else I
this.
was thinking about too is,
Mhm.
respecting someone else's point of view or someone else's perspective.
Yeah, because if you can't put yourself like in their spot,
Mhm.
then yeah, then you can't gain
Yeah.
perspective. You
Yeah.
you are lacking in your critical thinking skills,
Right, right.
basically,
Right, or
because
somebody
you're
gives you
assuming.
feedback even about
Yeah.
yourself, and it's
Hmm.
like, you might not see yourself that way, but this person is
Hmm.
telling you that you've made them feel, a
Hmm.
certain way because of your behavior,
Hmm.
and, you have to almost look at it from that person's point of view and kind of, understand that maybe their perspective could be wrong, but there's definitely something to listen to and pay attention to as well.
Right, yeah, like, so what could it be that would be causing
Yeah.
them to, so if you're in their shoes and you come in and you see something you don't like, or somebody's behaving in a certain way, why would that person react in the way that they are? And and I think that it's helpful to really do it, in a open way, like truly to understand. I think that we've gotten to a point, particularly in our country, but around
Mhm.
the world, where we assume, if by someone's phrasing, or if they indicate any sort of a political
Mhm.
ideology, anything at
Mhm.
all, we assume stuff about them, and so we don't we consider why they might be behaving that way, or
Yeah.
how they might be affected, or get to that spot. And if you can try to honestly put yourself in their spot, why would this make sense? Because everything that everybody does makes sense to them at the time,
Mhm.
and if you can do that, it doesn't mean that necessarily you're going to change your mind, or you're going to do something different, or that you really did hurt their feelings, or that you were at fault or to blame, or anything like that. Sometimes people can feel hurt by something I say or do, and that it's not my deal. It's something within
Mhm.
them,
True, right.
that
That's
took
true too.
that
That's
in a
very true
certain
too.
certain way. So
Yep.
by them sharing it with me, if I'm trying to stay open, and um, be considerate, then I can listen to what they have to say, and try to get some perspective, like,
Mhm.
okay, and I don't have to necessarily respond that I'm sorry that you feel that way, because that's often not a quality response. But I can also use perspective, in I can ask somebody I trust, a counselor, a sponsor, a friend, I can run it by them. This person said that when I said or did this, that it was hurtful or demeaning to them, and I'm having difficulty seeing how that might be. And if you trust them, you can take their ideas. Sometimes it's just rallying the troops,
Right.
and you just want them to say that you were right. But as you continue to develop, and really look at why you do what you do, that kind of stuff, and be open, then yeah, the people that I talk to about these things, I trust them to share the truth with me. I mean, it's still their opinion. And I can
Right.
still be like, well, you're all wrong, and screw you all.
Mhm.
That rarely happens, because part of the gaining perspective in life, is that I try to surround myself with people that are quality, I consider to be quality, who I consider to be able to, look at themselves if they, accidentally frequently behave badly, or all of that. And so when I do go to them for perspective, then I trust that they're really going to share with me
Right.
what they think. So yeah, so to say that it did it change is an understatement. It
Right.
is what I feel like recovery is learning how to regulate your emotions as effectively as you can. and
Right.
and that's about gaining perspective, because if I can pause when I'm upset about something, and get a different perspective on it, then I often can not act out or behave in a way that isn't who I want to be or how I want
Right.
to show up in the world.
I like that. When I was thinking about that question, and I was just on this track of thought, was that my perspective began to change once I started associating with people. Once I went to get help for my drinking and was
Hmm.
asking other people for help, and like you, heard my story through other people. Once
Hmm.
I did that, I began to have some trust for people and
Hmm.
open up to people for the first time, I think, in my life, really, and
Hmm.
felt safe doing that. And that changed my perspective, because the world was no longer a place where I was threatened by other people, but other people could actually be a resource that could help me,
Hmm.
which was new for me at that time, as I was living at that life. Here comes someone from Stuart, Florida. Let's take the call. And hello, caller. How are you from Stuart, Florida?
Hey, John and Angela, this is Al from
I
Vero
knew it
Beach.
was Al. I was going to say Al. Hey, Al, how are you?
Hey, I haven't seen you in a few weeks, John. You did a great job on your talk there for the Arizona group.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I haven't listened to that yet.
Well, I know there was a certain person that tried to bust your chops, and you handled it.
Did I? I can't remember. Oh, whatever. Okay.
I got angry. Hey, I got angry for you.
Oh,
Isn't that great? I do that too sometimes. It's like, wait a minute.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what's on your mind?
But, well, good seeing you guys. I mean,
Yeah.
I love this program, actually. But my perspective, and I'm going like, what is this? What are they talking about? and I got thinking, you know what? Three Stooges, Rick and David Nelson, Leave It to Beaver. That was my childhood. TV.
Oh, sure.
Adults in my era anyway never talked to the kids.
Right.
Even the teachers. It was memorize, take a test. The only teacher I remember well is the one who read during the 4th or 5th grade. That's the only one.
Yep.
I had all kinds of questions in life.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them came to you and said,
it.
Albert, how do you feel about this situation? Or what's your perspective?
Nobody cared. Nobody cared.
Nobody, it's like, hey, you go out the door, when you wake up, you play all day, you come in, you go to sleep or watch TV. No adult supervision to amount to anything, especially the conversation. Adult conversation would have helped me tremendously. And then I started drinking at 14, and then I walked around till I was 37 years old with the personality and the brain of a 14-year-old. I really believe that. I worked a hard-ass, dangerous job, and I was a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And at 37, I was divorced, 2 kids. Still, I was 14, and mentally,
Yeah.
So change. How did I change? I had to change everything. Women, I was a womanizer. I was a drunk, a drug addict. I have two wonderful kids, which I talk to constantly. I have a gang of wonderful grandkids. It's surprising how much they want to learn, and they're like little sponges. They love to talk, and what they like? They like reality. So for me, the change was to become an authentic. I hate to use that word, authentic person.
Right.
And,
Right.
I had to change every damn thing about me. Period. I mean, I was, a hoodlum from the street.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Still rock and rolling at 37 with a mentality of a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I think the program and the people in the program, being around healthy people,
Mhm.
meetings, and able to talk, so it's a huge
Yeah.
change for me. It's almost the Jekyll and Hyde thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Once I tore down the wall, cracked the shell around me, there was a good person in there, not a 14-year-old hoodlum.
Hmm.
Right. Right.
So,
Well, I think that's one reason, like
my,
when you think about the people that first were writing the AA program and everything back in the 30s, and they thought that their sobriety was miraculous and maybe God given, because of that different perspective that comes. For me, it came. I mean, it was a gradual process for sure, yeah, but
Mhm.
there was a huge shift from my
right,
drinking to being sober. The people that and my view of humanity and people and experiences in life when I was drinking to when I wasn't drinking, the shift was just amazing. So I can see how people would say, "Oh, this is a miracle, this is God doing this for me or whatever," because the change was so stark.
yeah, oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
and and it was a must. I couldn't continue on to live like a 14-year-old,
Right.
mentally. I mean, I think I had to change. I had to change, and almost everything for me.
Yeah. I hear
Almost
you.
everything.
I hear you.
And
Well, thank you, Al,
it's
for calling. I really
it,
appreciate it. It's good to hear from you. We're doing these streams now just once a month. However, I'm going to try
right.
to do more on the YouTube channel. I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I do want to do some. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but do some more videos and that kind of thing, and even reach out to some other YouTubers. So that might be coming up here pretty soon, and maybe some other live streams as well. Perhaps I can do a interview from a podcast on a live stream on a random day or something. So there'll be other opportunities, and Angela and I will continue doing this on a monthly basis as well. So thank you so much for calling, and thanks for
Hey,
your emails and your
hey,
friendship and your support. Appreciate it.
you guys are doing a great job. Love you.
Love you too.
Oh,
Take care,
Take
bud.
care.
thanks.
Bye
I
bye.
love you too. Yeah.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.
Always nice to hear from our regular callers. Anyone else that wants to call, you can reach us at 844-899-8278. So that was
Yeah.
question number 2, I think. Did your perspective change or improve after getting into recovery? And I guess we both, have we already answered that? I guess we both,
Yeah.
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 So we say, yeah, yeah. So here's a question that you asked, and I say yes or no. This is going to be an interesting one to talk about. I have some interesting thoughts on this, or at least I think they're interesting, but maybe not. But let's just say I have thoughts, okay, on this topic. Anyway.
I'm
Um,
interested in your perspective.
yeah, I'm very interested in my perspective too. Anyway, but your question was, were the steps a tool
Mm,
to help gain perspective?
yeah.
And
Well, I thought you were sharing your
oh,
perspective.
okay. I'll go first, I guess. Okay. Um, this is really interesting to me. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I think that I would answer yes and no. Because for a long time in my life, the steps were part of my life and they served as sort of a roadmap of how to deal with the ups and downs of life.
Mhm.
And they gave me like, a path to follow and measurements, I guess, even.
Mhm.
So in that respect, the steps were very helpful to me. But as I understand them now, it wasn't, even if the steps weren't written down, a lot of the experiences that come from the steps, I think I would have had anyway, like the
Mhm.
first 3 steps, you know, I got to the point where I admitted I had a problem.
Mhm.
I believed that I could be helped and I made a decision to get help. Those are the first 3 steps as I see
Mhm.
them. And that happened before I even knew what the first 3 steps were. So that was just part of the journey that I experienced. Now, I guess when you go into, talking with another person about the experience and that kind of thing, it helps seal it, I guess, in your mind, in my mind anyway, that, that I'm going through a process. So in that sense, maybe it did help me because it gave me a process or an understanding I'm going through a process. But the steps themselves, I don't know. It's what was within them, I guess, or the experience that I had with them. Is that kind of confusing?
No, I think I get what you're trying to say, and I believe that that's where I was going with it, was more of the the as a tool. How did the steps help you, or did they not? For some people, but I think that that's what they're designed for, is to be able to for people to kind of look at to gain perspective. On do I really have a problem with substances? Is this what I'm dealing with, or is it something else? But really considering if that's what you're dealing with, and if there's something you do want to do about it, and then making the decision to do something, all of that is part of gaining perspective, because it gives you options, when you're considering, do I have a problem, and then you have the option of either continuing on your path, or doing something about it, or doing more research.
Hmm.
Let's see, I don't know yet, so maybe I'll do some more research, to before I make a decision. But yeah, so even the first three, I think, are designed to help you gain perspective on who you are, what's going
Right.
on, and whether you have a problem or not. And then the fourth step is really good for, I think, people like us who have
That is helpful.
skewed
That did help
perspective,
me.
because it's a template
Right.
to think about situations. And even if that's the only part that you did was like the resentment inventory, um, that would be helpful for most people to have them
Right.
start thinking about um, things differently, to gain perspective,
It was
and
helpful.
oftentimes it can be detrimental in some ways to people, if they're doing it or working it with somebody who doesn't quite understand the purpose, or who really just doesn't have a lot of insight into their own stuff. Then things can sometimes be skewed. But for the most part, just the idea of writing down, the why you're annoyed with somebody, or mad about something, or whatever a situation is, and breaking it down into why are you really mad, and
Right.
that's where you kind of label what does this have to do with in my life.
That
How
process
does it
did help.
affect me, because
Yeah.
there are things that I was mad about that actually, when I looked at them, they didn't really affect anything in my life. I was just mad. I
Right.
didn't like it, you know
Right.
and and so yeah, so just having a tool like that that goes through, and it's like, okay, well, really, it doesn't affect me, so what's going on. And then of course the learning to be to be more discerning about having a part in it. Do I, and what does that have to do with, is it truly something that I have a part in it, like my setting myself up for failure in friendships by picking people to be friends with that didn't have the ability to be a good friend to me,
Hmm.
or people that I, pick friends with to save them. Like, I'm a good person and they have some issues, so I'll be their friend, and then help them become a good person. And that's not honest. Right, and so looking at that and being like, okay, yeah, so this person didn't betray me, and didn't isn't a bad friend, because their character necessarily. Sometimes it's I set it up in a way so that they couldn't succeed in a friendship with me. And so being able to recognize things like that and start taking responsibility for how to choose friends, how to be discerning and honest with myself on friends, relationships, all of that kind of stuff. um,
Yeah.
and so it was a huge thing for me, and it's still something that can be helpful,
Yeah.
particularly when I'm in a situation that I don't know why I'm circling, or what's going on, or I just have a lot of anger.
Yeah.
you know,
It worked well for me.
and
I
kind of
mean,
write that out.
yeah. Yeah, I had the same experience. It was good for me too, and it is still something that I fall back on. I've always been a person that has to write things out to understand what's going on in my head anyway. So the fourth step was kind of natural for me to be able to kind of put things down on paper.
Hmm.
And I was able to see, as everybody said, a pattern. I was able to recognize
Hmm.
where, my insecurities came from. And I was also able to understand, other people and my
Hmm.
parents, and I saw their humanity, and I
Yeah.
understood that, they had their own stuff they had to go through. So
Hmm.
it did help me tremendously. It put me on the path to, I guess, some sort of self-reflection that I really hadn't engaged in. Of course, I was pretty young at the time, but I really hadn't
Right.
engaged in much at that point in my
Yeah.
life. So it was a very, very helpful tool, and I still fall back on it. When things get really rough for me, and
Hmm.
for whatever reason, I will go through that process
Hmm.
just so I understand what the hell's going on with me and why I'm
Yeah,
reacting the way I
yeah,
am.
it's just really helpful, to get things down on paper
Yeah,
and to, even if just getting that, first insight into, how it looks or what my perspective currently is on it. Because sometimes,
yeah,
I'll go through things in my head so much and just circle and think that I know and think that I've already gone through all the different scenarios that could possibly, be and things like that. But when I actually sit down and write things out, then I can know, this is what I thought was important enough to write down. So I can go from there and decide, do I need to seek outside help from somebody, either as a, just a sounding board, or do I need professional help with this, or, what is the next step? Literally, no, figuratively,
right.
in resolving what's going on with me. And that's another thing that I learned in recovery is the perspective that my actions or inaction does have an effect on those around me, and
Mhm.
that it's my responsibility, to be considerate of that, and to think about how my actions or inactions affect people, and to be discerning and wise in what I choose to do and say. Not that I'm responsible for everybody's feelings and things like that, but I am responsible for how I show up in the world. And pre recovery, I didn't have that same insight. I wanted to be a good person, most of us do, but I generally had the idea that most of the world was against me, and that it was other people's fault, or sometimes I'd go the complete opposite of that, that I'm just never going to make it, and never going to
Mm.
achieve, because of my upbringing and stuff, and so the whole, yeah, everything's stacked against me, so there's no point. But now I see the different options that I have, and I have ability to gain perspective and different avenues I can take to do that. And the steps were extremely helpful in that, because of the way that they're organized.
Yeah.
And it provides you a couple of different options. So you don't always have to, do like a full on fourth step, to gain perspective on things. Sometimes it's more of doing a 10th step. Sometimes it's just looking for additional resources, which is kind of how
Right.
I consider the 11th step,
Ye
is just
Uh-huh.
learning more, and then what, seeking outside help, and there's so much more in the as far as professional help these days for people
Yeah.
who have any sort of substance use issue.
See, that's how I saw step 6 and 7 was when I got to the point, because that's just where I was at. I think
Mhm,
I was 4 years sober when I went through step 4. I did go to therapy before that, but
mhm,
after that, but that was with like a social worker with
mhm,
a master's degree. But after that, I got into group therapy and was really doing a lot more of that kind of work because
mhm,
I guess I was interested in doing that after that step, and that's how I see steps 6 and 7, was that desire to grow as a human being and change and
Hmm.
develop, to be the best as I could be, I guess, in dealing with life.
Yeah.
But as Jennifer's asked me, it's like, it was the principles within these steps that
Hmm.
meant more to me than just the structure of them themselves. And that's really, I
Right.
guess, the way I'm thinking about it now. Although it's nice to have them laid out in a list.
Right.
There's no doubt about that,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah.
I think that, quite a few of us, particularly when we get to a point where we're secular in some way, we appreciate, the straightforwardness of having something to do to help you. So having a list, having,
Right.
that kind of stuff is something that I think a lot of us are more drawn to, as if
I've always
it's
been a list
scientific.
maker.
It's
Yeah.
not scientific, but it feels like it. It's like, ah, okay, here's, yeah, a guide for
Yeah.
us. But like you said with 5 and 6, I see them very differently than they're written. And
Yeah.
for me, it is very much, probably the key to gaining perspective. Is that, I looked at, why I had these behaviors that I
Mm.
found in 4. Why did I keep doing these things over and over again? What was the meaning that I gave to this stuff that may not be accurate? So, it was opening up myself to the idea that, that I may have some ideas that are not correct. And then, for 7 is, when I go through and I write out, what some new possibilities are
Yeah.
for those ideas or situations or
That was
whatever,
so
so that I can,
helpful.
yeah, create different meanings for it.
I
So,
learned that from you, when you and I were having a conversation. I forgot I learned it from you until you reminded me one day. But you and I did a podcast, and you were talking about how character defects were coping mechanisms, and
Mhm,
that they worked for us at one time, but just no longer worked in the real world as sober people, and that
mhm,
step 6 and 7 really was all about trying to find healthier coping skills. You're adding
yeah,
something to your life.
mhm,
You're not removing bad stuff.
right,
You're just like adding some positive ways of dealing with life. And that was
mhm,
such a help to me. I remember shortly after talking to you, I was speaking at a group in Kansas City here, and I was talking about I had a conversation with a friend, and she
mhm.
told me this, blah, blah, blah. I was so excited. But that is very true. I think that's exactly what those were. And that's all about perspective as well, because you're thinking, it's just a different way of approaching life. Is like, I can't use these coping skills that I had in the past. I need to find a
Mhm.
different way of handling life.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and I think that, one of the things about that is helpful to me is the the idea that we usually talk about those things is defects, character defects or defects
terrible
of
word.
character. Yeah, and that, part of my learning and growing and in recovery is that, I learned that no, they weren't, defects. That these were things that I had learned to survive, and they were very effective in what they were doing, and because I've survived, you know, and it's just that they're not effective, in the same way. And so I really, it took away from me any of the of feelings of like guilt or shame of
Yeah.
that I had done, things or behaved in ways that weren't, ideal.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to carry that around anymore because, just like it's interesting to me that in step 4 it was easier for me to forgive my parents and stuff and see their perspective and that they were doing the best they can, and it took longer for me to be able to do that for myself and
Yeah.
to to realize that wait, that's the same thing with me. And it was in 5 and 6 that, or 6 and 7, that I started to see that for myself as well. And so it was changing some of the language,
Mhm.
in that. It was still, in the way that I understand it, or the way that I, look at the steps, part of the whole, thing. But it's a very different way of looking at it
Yeah.
is what I understand these days. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And your other question was about, and we kind of talked about this, but what about therapy and professional help and other
Mhm.
tools learned outside of the rooms? And for me, I think what I got from that I really wasn't getting into in AA and going to meetings and stuff like that
Mhm.
was working on self-esteem. And
Mhm.
I learned, and I was talking to Beth about this from her book not too long ago.
Right.
But I was very fortunate that I had this boss who sat me down. I was selling insurance at the time, and actually my problem was I couldn't sell insurance because I hated it. And he told me that my whole problem was I had low self-esteem, is what he told me,
Right.
which made me felt like total shit. But
Right.
he was right, and working on that did take me to a different level.
Mhm.
And what I did, I went. That's when I started doing some more intensive type therapy work. And what I learned from that was connecting physical activity to my mental state and how I felt about myself. And
Mhm.
so this really was a huge shift for me because I really was feeling better about myself. My self-esteem increased as I was taking better care of my body physically.
Mhm.
It's just the two things had to balance themselves out. And I learned that from my doctor. And it put me in a different direction. It was something that I was doing for myself outside of, recovery, or
Mhm.
outside of the, AA meetings and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, and I think in the last few years too, there's been more talk about things outside of
Hmm.
AA, and what we would traditionally consider recovery, as being things that aid in our recovery and our wellness. And one, of the main things that was never really talked about when I was early in recovery was, the physical wellness of exercise, of eating well, of, because most of it was still the people were still smoking cigarettes in rooms, during the
Yeah.
meeting and stuff. And so, yeah, so it wasn't a real key topic, but now, we're understanding that, yeah, that all of that plays into our ability to um, stay in recovery, to either, whether it's, not use or drink or, act in whatever our, thing is that we do. Um, that yeah, those things, getting enough sleep, surrounding ourselves by good people or people that we trust, all of that stuff aids in our recovery, and most of that is not talked about within AA or a lot of the you know the rooms, we say, in recovery. Those are all things that tend to be outside, but that are I've learned or gained perspective on as being part of what I need to do to keep myself healthy. Um, and yeah, so I really appreciate that there's a lot more tools now,
Hmm.
a lot of directions people can go, and a lot of information on how different paths that people can take to get sober or to get healthy, whatever it
It
is that
really
they're
is a
trying
good
to
time
do.
to get into recovery,
Yeah.
especially with so many different groups and being connected online. And, I'm just really interested in all the people that are finding others to support them in their recovery without having any sort of formal program to belong to, and or people that will mix and match. They might go to a SMART meeting or a LifeRing meeting or an AA meeting or whatever they need to do. But there's a lot. I don't know if there's a lot, but I've come in contact with people. Oh, I hear your puppy dog. I come in
I
contact
know.
with people who are just kind of finding others like them, through social media or some other means, and forming little groups to support each other. And I think that's pretty cool to do that. Plus all the other literature and stuff that we have out there, and podcasts like ours,
Right. Yeah.
help as
No, I
well.
totally am on that page. And then the last thing that we were thinking about as far as perspective
Mhm.
was, helping people.
Yeah.
And oftentimes within, 12-step community, we talk about it as sponsoring.
Right.
But, I think it can be like any sort of helping others. It gave me perspective. in that it gave me kind of a purpose, and some, self-esteem that I could be helpful to others. And also that, it took quality reflection and introspection to be able to do that, to have somebody come to you who's new and in recovery, and share my experience with them, and then not expect them to be at whatever place I was at when they came to me.
Mhm.
So not expect them to do everything that I do on a daily basis to stay sober, to get a perspective on where was I at, what was I willing to do when had that much time or was that new in recovery. And so to be patient and caring for other people, and so that's been huge,
Yeah.
as far as perspective, to
Yeah.
to literally put myself, like, where was I, what was I capable of understanding or doing at that time, and then not to have expectations beyond that. Oftentimes I found people are much more capable than I was at the time I came into recovery. But yeah, if I go with that starting point, then I'm much more helpful than if I just say, yeah, I'll help you, and here's what you have to do, or here's what I do on a daily basis, because that wouldn't have necessarily been helpful to me. I was only capable of small increments of change at early on,
Right.
and yeah.
Well, it does help gain perspective if you're trying to help somebody or you are helping somebody, and they're, it's not like I hate this idea that I'm feeling better because of someone else's issues, but sometimes it helps me put into perspective of that.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm doing better than I might have realized, and that my problems are not what my problems used to be. But,
Hmm.
one thing I was thinking about here was that sometimes I can over, not sometimes, but a lot of times I'll over commit myself to things
Hmm.
involved with service type work, even the
Hmm.
podcast sometimes, and I find that I do that in a way to kind of cope with whatever the reality is of the world that I don't like. I can just
Hmm.
throw myself in my work, and in doing that, I don't have to think about COVID and all the crap that's going on in the world. And
Hmm.
I just throw myself into that. And then to the point where I just get burned out on it. And I kind of crash. And I'm just finding that, you know, maybe my perspective isn't, you know, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to the point where I just live with a great perspective for the rest of my life. I think the best that I can hope for is that I can recognize when my perspective is skewed. And I think I'm
Right.
going through a time right now where it is slightly skewed.
Hmm.
That I'm thinking that I'm doing something great when I'm really practicing I'm just really avoiding stuff is what I'm doing, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I
So
and I don't think, like, perspective, is a set thing. That's why
no,
I put it as gaining perspective. So I think that
right.
the ability to gain perspective is the tool that I think
Yeah,
is essential. Is and it's not always the same thing. So it's
right.
not always writing things down. Sometimes it's repeatedly getting yourself into a spot that you don't like to be in, and then that gives you some perspective of, I don't like that I keep getting in this spot. So, what am I doing, that is getting me here, and what are my options, to do something differently with that.
Yeah.
Or, I find myself hating humanity. So,
Right.
why do I keep feeling this way?
I
And
know.
what are some of the things that I can do to help me have perspective on that, and
Yeah.
sometimes it is just that humanity's awful and I need to accept that.
Mhm.
But also I can do things like, maybe not, watch as much news,
Yeah,
for,
that's actually
a
something I
week
put
or
down.
something,
Mhm.
and maybe I can try something different. If there's a new skill that I've wanted to learn for a long time and put put it off, maybe that's something I need to add that will just give me
Yeah.
a little bit of perspective on, human nature and on,
Yeah.
the good in the world, or, that kind of thing. So just the ability to not be stuck in assumptions about, anyone else or how things should be, because I think the assumptions, lead to expectations, or they're, go hand in hand, and oftentimes that doesn't lead to serenity for me.
No. Well, we have reached an hour. Angela,
Okay.
thank you for the suggestion. I think this turned
Mhm.
out really well. I've enjoyed. It was good for me to think about this, reflect upon it, talk to you about it. Thank you, Fred and Al, for calling, and thank you everybody out there for your comments in the live chat. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to play my disco music.
Nice. Yeah, we'll be back next month, the day after Thanksgiving, actually.
Oh, is that right?
So
The day after
yeah.
Thanksgiving. All right. Until
So
then, y'all take care. Be well.
bye bye.